Chapter 51. Beside the River of Trust. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations. Beside the River of Trust. Time flies, and years flow. This year, Fang Zhengji is now 15. In the Huaiyan County, in the northern River of Trust Province, a stream of river flowed through the county, splitting this ancient city into its north and south, and at the same time creating a water traffic path, causing this city to become an important business and commerce district in the northern desert. The sun shone brightly, and a cool breeze was blowing. On the river on Trust, a few pleasure boats sailed along in the direction of the wind, sending silky ripples spreading across the river surface. The biennial law of Dao examinations was only 3 days away. The River of Trust Province had set the examination location at the Huaiyan County, and attracted gifted scholars and beautiful ladies from all around, one after another gathering at the riverside of the River of Trust. The green willows swayed gently in the breeze, and a tall rectangular stage adorned with red carpets elegantly occupied the best sightseeing spot in the River of Trust. The stage was decorated with lanterns and colored banners, and below the stage, brocade clothes and flowery robes decorated its surroundings, which were covered densely by fresh flowers. In the March spring, 100 flowers bloomed. According to rules set in the previous years, a gathering of scholars would be organized before the start of the Law of Dao examinations, inviting famous people from all parts of the area to gather and watch. It was called the 100-Flower Gathering. Gur. A low beastly growl was heard, but not many people paid attention to it. After all, beast-rearing techniques had already become commonplace in some bigger families within these years. Young master, over here, there is a mix of good people and scumbags, and even consist of people who dally with women and have affairs. Considering your reputation, there is absolutely no need for you to attend this gathering. A strong, sturdy man with a bearded face sat on a 3-eyed scarlet flame tiger, which was enveloped in red and white fur, with a thin opening on its forehead and a red ball of flame blazing on its tail. He was asking a youth dressed in a bluish-white fine robe, and his attitude was unusually respectful. The finely clothed youth slowly raised his head, looked at the tablet adorned with 3 big words. 100-Flower Gathering, and slightly paused his steps. His expression was exceedingly cold. When I left, grandfather instructed me to act with courtesy. The finely clothed youth replied indifferently, then continued to walk towards the front. The strong man didn't dare to speak any further. He quickly jumped off the 3-eyed scarlet flame tiger and followed behind the finely clothed youth, walking towards the Jade Square. The 3-eyed scarlet flame tiger growled in a low voice, then in one leap, jumped on the beast stand at the entrance and lay down softly. Around the 3-eyed scarlet flame tiger, many different kinds of fearsome beasts also lay. The finely clothed youth didn't walk very quickly, and walked directly towards the high stage of the 100-Flower Gathering. As he walked, he slowly took out a golden bone silver thread fan from his pocket. Tossing it lightly, an ink painting of a mountain river illustration revealed itself. When a few scholars dressed in brocade robes who were chatting animatedly saw the finely clothed youth, they were instantly taken aback, then fixing their gaze upon the golden bone silver thread fan, a horrified expression appeared on their faces. They quickly moved away and gave up their spots. On the other hand, the finely clothed youth's expression remained the same, neither angry nor happy, neither downcast nor delighted. Walking towards the center seat in front, he gradually sat down. A plump man dressed in brocade clothes at this moment was chatting loudly with another man dressed in brocade clothes beside him, while holding a handful of fruits. Laughing animatedly, he suddenly saw the finely clothed youth, and his face instantly turned a deathly shade of white, as if he had seen a ghost. He hurriedly shot up and quickly grabbed the man beside him and ran off. In a blink of an eye, the surroundings of the finely clothed youth seemed to have vanished like smoke in thin air, leaving only the strong bearded man. Back off. But, this place. Back off. Yes, young master. The strong bearded man's gaze swept across his surroundings once more, and backed off. But, none of the rest of the scholars surrounding him was willing to return back to their seats. Yan Xiu actually participated in the 100-flower gathering. Isn't this too unthinkable? With some calculation, it seems that Yan Xiu had reached the age of 16 this year. No wonder. After a few sentences of debate, the scholars sitting a distance away didn't speak further and continued to admire the flowers and taste the wine. Right at this moment, a youth whose face was fair and clear, dressed in a yellow brocade robe, with a long blue sword at his waist, walked smilingly up the tall stage, accompanied by a few armored bodyguards. "Quick, look, Meng Yushu is here. I heard that this Meng Yushu had accessed Dao since a year ago. I fear that his participation in the law of Dao examinations this time would definitely gain him the double role champion." The scholars discussed softly among one another, an envious look appearing on each of their faces. The youth dressed in a yellow brocade robe, Meng Yushu, heard the discussion around him, and a somewhat delighted expression appeared on his face. Following which, he directly made his way over beside Yan Xiu and lightly cupped his fist with his other hand as a sign of greeting. Huayan Meng residence, Meng Yushu, expresses his fortune in meeting young master Yan Xiu. Yan Xiu's expression was ice cold. Without even taking a look at Meng Yushu, he remained seated on his chair and lightly swayed the golden bone silver thread fan on his hands. A light gust of wind blew across. Meng Yushu felt a desolate sense of chilliness. Considering the Meng residence's prestige in the Huayan County, and his abilities of having accessed Dao, there wasn't much people he had taken the initiative to greet. But, this Yan Xiu in front of him didn't even bother to look at him. This was an indifferent form of disregard, and furthermore, it was in front of so many scholars. Meng Yushu's expression changed slightly, and gripped the sword on his hand. His chest rose a few times, but, ultimately restored the smile on his face. Since young master Yan Xiu loves peace and quiet, then Meng Yushu shall take his leave. Meng Yushu once again cupped his hands, finding a way out of the situation. Io, heaven has opened his eyes. Such a good seat with nobody sitting on it. This is really my blessing. Right at this moment, a clear voice suddenly rang out from behind Meng Yushu. Meng Yushu frowned. He had just found an excuse that Meng Yushu loved peace and quiet, but never thought that somebody would come and make noise. If he really allowed him to sit here, then weren't his words just now slapping his own mouth? Just as he prepared to act to prevent this, he suddenly realized that there seemed to be no need to do so. Considering Yan Xiu's personality, don't tell me he would really allow somebody to sit calmly beside him. The edges of his mouth curved into a smile. Thinking of Yan Xiu's coldness a moment ago, and thinking that the new person had overestimated his own capabilities, he suddenly felt that watching the tigers fight from the side lines wasn't actually a bad choice. Even though he didn't know whether the new person would be a tiger. But ultimately, he could still take the opportunity to find out how much patience this Yan Xiu, known as the Cold Azura among the youths in the Great Xia dynasty, actually had. Hey, are you sitting or not? If you are not, please make way. Just as Meng Yushu became secretly delighted with his thoughts, he felt a burst of strength on his shoulder, then, his entire body was pulled up by this strength and his body leaned back. Plop. He fell on his buttocks. People these days have such poor inner quality. Good dogs don't block the way, doesn't anybody know this? A voice filled with disdain rang out once again. Then, a lanky youth dressed in a blue coarse robe, wearing a blue cloth on his head effortlessly bypassed Meng Yushu, walked towards a seat beside Yan Xiu and sat down. Ah, this 100-flower gathering is indeed not too shabby, they even provide a fruit platter. Seeming as if he had discovered a new continent, the youth picked up the fruits placed in front of him and bit down. The sweetness was unparalleled. As the youth's voice sounded out, the initially bustling 100-flower gathering instantly became extremely silent. Only the sound of the willows dancing in the breeze along the riverside was left, giving off a gentle rustling sound. Chapter 52. Yun Qinggu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations. The scholars stared, their mouths agape with shock. Nobody dared to believe what was happening. Did he want to live anymore? He actually provoked Meng Yushu. Not only did he provoke Meng Yushu, he even took away the fruits placed in front of Yan Xiu. What an act of killing two birds with one stone. Most importantly, this youth seemed to be savoring it without a care for the world. Isn't this too cocky? Meng Yushu's expression turned black. When he saw clearly the youth sitting beside Yan Xiu, his face was so black that water could drip out of it. That blue robe made with coarse cloth, the coarse cloth worn on his head, and the boots he wore on his feet that were polished so brightly it could almost give off light, was clear evidence that he was a country bumpkin from the village. A country bumpkin, actually standing on his territory, under the gaze of everybody, causing him to fall to the ground. He absolutely couldn't stand this. As he prepared to explode with rage, a soft wave of recitation sounded out at his ear. Act with courtesy, act with courtesy. Meng Yushu was taken aback, then realized that this sound came from Yan Xiu, who was seated beside the youth. At this moment, Yan Xiu's expression was cold as ice, his two lips opening and closing continuously. He was reciting that phrase, act with courtesy. Act with courtesy. Meng Yushu frowned deeply. The hand gripping onto the sword at his waist almost turned white. What did Yan Xiu's words mean? Is he asking him to act with courtesy? But this person had stepped on his head, was he still supposed to be courteous? All of a sudden, Meng Yushu thought of the main event of this 100-flower gathering and his eyes instantly lit up as if he suddenly understood something. This is what he meant. Once he thought of this, Meng Yushu stood up from the floor, lightly patted away the dirt from his buttocks and took a slight bow towards Yan Xiu and the youth. I am Meng Yushu, how can I address you? These words were naturally directed towards the youth, but when this scene reached the eyes of the surrounding scholars, they were instantly baffled. What was happening? He actually didn't retaliate and unsheath his sword. How can he stand this? Furthermore, he even asked for his name. Since when did Meng Yushu have such good temper? They absolutely didn't dare to believe. At this moment, the youth was still chewing on the fruits. When he heard Meng Yushu's question, he waved his hands and with a look of disdain, replied, if you don't have anything to say, leave. I am waiting to see the performance. The surrounding scholars instantly felt as if someone had stuffed an egg in their mouths. They were completely lost for words. Who was this person dressed in a coarse robe? He actually didn't even bother to reply Meng Yushu and instead asked him to leave. This attitude, indeed, caused people to be unable to reply. Meng Yushu was similarly stunned. Carefully sizing up this youth, he thought for a while and realized, there didn't seem to be such a person in the Huaiyan county. Just as he prepared to rage, he heard Yan Xiu begin to recite once again. Act with courtesy, act with courtesy. Meng Yushu's expression changed again and again, his chest rising and falling furiously. After exactly 15 minutes of restraint did he manage to hold back the anger rising inside him. Since young master have come to this 100-flower gathering, you would definitely know that the main event of this gathering is centered around this word, flower. How about we make a bet today? Meng Yushu tried his best to keep his voice calm, but he still involuntarily gritted his teeth. Bet. Tell me more. The youth's expression seemed interested. Let's compete who can unveil the veil of the beauty, shall we? Meng Yushu twitched his mouth towards the high stage behind him with a challenging look. Beauty. There are beauties today. The youth's expression seemed slightly taken aback. Meng Yushu instantly laughed coldly to himself. He was indeed a country bumpkin. He didn't even know that the main event of the 100-flower gathering was, compete for beauties. Betting with such a person, would it be losing his dignity? But, since Yen Xiu continuously spoke of acting with courtesy, he would carry out matters according to the rules of the 100-flower gathering. Hopefully this Yen Xiu wouldn't have any further opinions. How about it, does young master dare to accept this? The winner is whoever unveils the beauty's veil first. The youth continued. Naturally. Meng Yushu nodded. Even though main competition of the 100-flower gathering was for the beauties, but, it is centered about competing through language arts. If one wished to unveil the beauty, they had to display sufficient linguistic ability and win the hearts of the beauty in front of the crowd in order for her to unveil. Meng Yushu didn't believe that this country bumpkin in front of him would have any linguistic ability. Furthermore, even if this country bumpkin really had some outstanding work of art, just based on his attire alone, it wouldn't be possible at all to win the beauty's heart. Hence, this round of betting was a sure win. Ever since the rules of the bet had been agreed upon, the results were already set. Sure. The youth seemed to have not hesitated at all and nodded agreeably. Meng Yushu was instantly delighted. This country bumpkin was indeed brave, he actually dared to bet with him. He couldn't blame himself then. Since we made a bet, there should be a stake. Meng Yushu patiently guided. Yes, you are right. The youth nodded once again. He didn't feel that there was a problem at all. Meng Yushu felt that this was enough. Looking at the youth in front of him, he dug into his pockets and finally hesitated a little. If he bet too much, it wouldn't be good if this person decided to shrink away. How about we just bet 100 taels of silver? Meng Yushu probed. Sure. The youth instantly smiled when he heard this. Alright, let's invite Yen Xiu to be our witness. We will put out 100 taels of silver each, and bet who can unveil the beauty's veil first. When Meng Yushu finished his sentence, he fished out a piece of 100 taels silver banknote and placed it in front of Yen Xiu. Yen Xiu glanced, and his expression instantly became even colder, continuing to mumble, "Act with courtesy, act with courtesy." On the other hand, the youth took up the silver note with a delighted look. Can I invite young master to place down his silver note as well? When Meng Yushu saw the youth take a look, but didn't act, he became somewhat suspicious. Silver note. Oh. This isn't a problem, just relax, anyway, I won't lose. When the youth heard, he waved his hands towards Meng Yushu, his face unconcerned. Meng Yushu's expression instantly darkened further. What was the meaning of this? Betting without taking out the money. Cheat. Just as he prepared to argue, he looked at Yen Xiu and instantly swallowed his words. He completely believed that with Yen Xiu as the witness, this person would definitely not play cheat. Furthermore, in the Huayan County, there were indeed not many people who dared to play cheat against Meng Yushu. Humph. Meng Yushu huffed. Since the bet had already been confirmed, he didn't bother quarreling with the youth further and sat down alone a distance away. Meng Yushu actually made a bet with that person about who will unveil the beauty first. This seems interesting. Don't tell me Meng Yushu didn't notice the name list of the beauty competition today, and doesn't know who today's beauty is. When the scholars heard Meng Yushu and the youth's conversation, they instantly began to discuss spiritedly. At this very moment, on the River of Trust, a humongous 3-story high decorated pleasure boat adorned with golden silk gradually cruised down the surface of the River of Trust. On the tip of the decorated pleasure boat, a golden flag printed with the words, Yun, danced in the wind. Ripples spread across the water surface. This pleasure boat sailed between many other boats, yet, nobody would compare this to the rest of the boats. Because, the owner of this pleasure boat, represented the highest of mountains, a mountain that simply nobody could summit. She. Why would she come to the Huayan County? Meng Yushu's face, initially filled with confidence, instantly turned ugly when he saw this boat. Similarly, he clearly knew who this pleasure boat represented. A woman of wonder that caused an infinite number of scholars in the great Xia dynasty to fall heads over tails for her. Violin, chess, reading, drawing, poetry, phrases, songs, essays, there was nothing she wasn't proficient in. Most importantly, nobody had ever unveiled Yun Qingwu's veil. Furthermore, there was never a person who managed to set foot upon Yun Qingwu's boat. Of course, this person referred to men. Chapter 53. Inner Quality. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations. Meng Yushu felt that this bet can be nullified. Because, it simply wasn't possible for a person to unveil Yun Qingwu's veil. But, as he thought of his previous anger, he was still rather unsatisfied. No matter what, he still had to try. If that really wasn't possible, then he had to think of another method. Who would have known that the 100-flower gathering in the Huaiyan County would actually attract Yun Qingwu to participate in it? This was simply unthinkable. What was the reason? Yan Xiu's gaze shifted to the gradually approaching pleasure boat. His expression didn't change a single bit, as if he had seen yet as if he hadn't seen it. Only when the boat reached the riverside did he adjust his posture, as if he had suddenly thought of something. On the other hand, the youth sitting beside him was still the same as before. So much so that he even leaned back slowly, and slightly closed his eyes, as if enjoying the crisp wind from the riverside and the flowers blooming around him. Yan Xiu didn't speak. The youth also didn't speak. Except that after Yan Xiu's behavior became too proper, the youths appeared even more unglamorous. Sitting together with such differing postures, it appeared extremely awkward. When the surrounding scholars saw this, they didn't know what to say. These two people sitting together was absolutely too uncoordinated, but they just had to sit together like this. Furthermore, they even seemed to be harmonious and in peace. Weird, too weird. The scholars at the 100-flower gathering naturally set their aims on the flowers, even though Yan Xiu and the youth could attract their attention for a while, but it was indeed not possible for all these scholars to keep on staring at these two men. Furthermore, the pleasure boat adorned with golden silk had finally come to a halt. Except, the people on the boat didn't have any intention of coming down. But, despite this, the atmosphere in the 100-flower gathering had evidently become livelier. The scholars cheered and jumped, loudly shouting Yun Qingwu's name. There were even a few who actually brought over their brushes and desks, and began to write there and then. Drawing pictures, writing poems, creating inscriptions, the atmosphere was lively indeed. The 100-flower gathering was a gathering for scholars to socialize before the law of Tao examinations, hence there was no specially appointed judge. The rules were simple. After the talented girls displayed their skills, the scholars would place flowers inside the baskets in front of the girls, which counted as choosing a beauty. Even though it was simple, it was very fair. Boom! A gong sounded. The 100-flower gathering had officially begun. Then, the talented girls began to mount the stage and display their skills, each of them wearing colorful long dresses, playing musical instruments, dancing. Some even made a few poems on stage, encouraging scholars to compose poems to pair with theirs. Yan Xiu's gaze remained calm as water. On the other hand, the youth was full of interest, watching eagerly. He even shouted out phrases such as, "not bad," or, "beautiful," from time to time, attracting silent criticisms from the surrounding scholars. Country bumpkin. Inner quality. I am embarrassed to be seen with such a person. In actual fact, the scholars were also deep in discussion, most of their voices even louder than the youth. But, a youth wearing a coarse blue robe sitting in the middle of scholars dressed in embroidered clothes and fanciful garments naturally caused people to feel strange. The youth lightly patted away the dust on the cleanly washed robe he wore on his body. He naturally wasn't able to hear other people scolding him in their hearts. With a leisurely and carefree expression, he continued to listen to the songs, eating and drinking to his heart's content. Or it could also be said, even if he was able to hear, he wouldn't pay any attention to them. Because, from where he was from, that was how everybody dressed. If he really had to dress like these scholars every day, time will definitely hang very heavily. Finally, the singing had more or less stopped, and movement appeared within the pleasure boat that stopped by the riverside. The boat doors opened gradually. 2 rows of ladies dressed in standardized jade-green dresses neatly walked out, and behind them, 2 ladies dressed in gold-threaded long skirts followed. When everyone had neatly arranged themselves below the boat, a graceful figure finally walked out slowly from within the boat. Wearing an elegant sky-blue long skirt imprinted with a few snow-white tree peonies, and with a mirror-shaped pearl flower with the appearance of a golden moon on her head, her jet-black long hair fell all the way to her waist, ending right at the golden-purple belt at the waist. It was a female figure of absolute beauty. Unfortunately, a black cloth blocked the woman's facial features. Yet, this brought out the woman's skin, which was as white and beautiful as snow. Stepping lightly on the ground, a pair of boots embroidered with flowers sewn from golden threads wrapped around the woman's feet and slowly walked up the riverside. Then, directly up the stage. Up until now. The scholars below the stage were already completely silent, staring paralyzed at woman on the stage, a blazing ray of light shining their eyes. Of course, there were also exceptions. For example, Yan Xiu, who was sitting right at the front, continued to wear his usual ice-cold expression, and the youth sitting by his side continued to leisurely munch on his fruits. "Young lady Yun Qingwu, please excuse my ugly display." A voice crisp as a nightingale sounded out. Yun Qingwu lowered her head slightly, bowing. Her posture was elegant and her temperament was outstanding. "Great." Below the stage, the youth clapped cheerfully, instantly pulling the stunned scholars back to reality. Good things have always been wildly pursued by people. Those who destroyed their beautiful dreamlands naturally wouldn't be treated well. All the scholars stared at the youth, their faces filled with anger. A few even began to crack their fists. If Yan Xiu wasn't by his side, the situation would definitely not have been dealt with as courteously. Yun Qingwu gazed at the youth. She didn't even seem to have flinched. Instead, she gradually turned her body around and gave another bow to the youth. Yun Qingwu expresses her thanks to young master. Her manner was extraordinarily composed. "You're welcome. I wonder what song is Sister Qingwu going to play today?" The youth's jet-black eyes looked at Yun Qingwu, felt the anxious atmosphere around him, and smiled lightly. Naturally, he understood why the surrounding people were enraged, but people should be treated similarly. When other women mounted the stage, there were many cheers. If there wasn't any when Yun Qingwu went up, wouldn't it be strange? Who would have thought that young master also understands music? Today, young lady wishes to perform a song called The Reeds and Rushes. Yun Qingwu replied softly, not a single glimmer of disdain in her eyes. Instead, she was extremely respectful. The Reeds and Rushes. Fang Zhengji nodded, and didn't speak any further. Yet, this caused the surrounding scholars to reveal an expression of disdain. When they saw the youth inquire Yun Qingwu, they expected a deep discussion, yet all he did was nod, without expressing a single opinion. But, after despising the youth, the scholars once again began to burn with passion. Yun Qingwu's choice of the reed and rushes represented exactly the melancholy and dejection of pursuing one's love, yet falling short. Such a lady of wonder, yet despairing over not being able to pursue her love, indeed instilled a sense of pity in their hearts. This round of beauty, I will choose Yun Qingwu. A scholar sitting in the front row instantly walked out. Going in front of the flower basket with Yun Qingwu's name inscribed on it, he prepared to place the fresh flower on his hands inside. Unfortunately, he wasn't fast enough. Because, another scholar was able to run faster than him. In a flash, he ended up in front of the flower basket. The fresh flowers in his hands reached the flower basket before the other scholar. When the flower entered the basket, his face flushed with red, a wild look on his face, ha ha ha. I am the first. When the other scholars saw this, they immediately began to panic. One by one they stood up from their chairs and rushed madly to the bottom of the stage, each of them competing to place their flowers in the basket, afraid of being too slow. Hence, all the suspense in the 100-flower gatherings beauty instantly disappeared. Do you even have the slightest bit of inner quality? She hadn't even performed, why are all of you rushing to court her favor and choose the beauty, rush your balls? Balls. The youth sitting right at the front gazed at the sea of scholars blocking his field of vision, and finally lost his patience and huffed. Chapter 54. Simple and direct. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations. The youth's voice wasn't loud, but the scholars that were pushing and shoving were instantly taken aback. They felt as if they had suddenly choked on a mouthful of chilly water. Their throats and hearts burned like fire. Inner quality. Court her favor. Their intentions were pointed out in front of everybody. Furthermore, it was in the face of a beautiful woman that could collapse an entire nation. All of the scholars felt as if their tails had been stepped on. Then, the youth's behavior diverted the awkwardness in their hearts, because, if they really had to choose who truly lacked inner quality, this youth would definitely get all the votes. Furthermore, most importantly, that balls. Balls, what was the meaning of that? Could he at least quote some classics? Or stop the crowd with his strength and powers? As a scholar, how could he actually say such vulgar words? Furthermore, it was right in front of such a beautiful woman. This brought absolute disgrace to education. Ashamed to be associated with him. The awkwardness within the hearts of the scholars turned into anger flowing out of their bodies. But, today was the 100-flower gathering, emphasizing on art, not combat. Moreover, if they really fought, it would only serve to confirm the youth's words. Humph. A few of the scholars who had already reached the stage placed the flowers in their hands into the basket and quickly returned to their original seats. Except, when they walked past the youth, they couldn't help but to huff coldly. Thank you, young masters, for your affection. Yun Qingwu will now perform the reeds and rushes. Yun Qingwu bowed once again towards the scholars. Her expression seemed to not have changed a lot. Hearing Yun Qingwu's words, the crowd of scholars instantly began to quieten. The youth's eyes closed slightly, a hint of a smile appearing once again at the edges of his mouth. Looking at Yun Qingwu's gaze that was calm as the autumn's water, he seemed to be pondering over something. On the other hand, Yan Xiu's expression was still ice-cold as before, except the golden bone silver thread fan on his hands began to fan a little more anxiously. A guqin was carried out by the two ladies behind her dressed in golden long skirts. They lifted it to the back of the high stage, and Yun Qingwu slowly sat down behind the guqin. Her slim, pale fingers plucked the guqin lightly. Music that was as beautiful as flowing water began to sound out. The entire 100-flower gathering had become completely silent. Everybody stared intently at Yun Qingwu's movements. Thick grow the rush leaves, their white dew turns to frost. He whom I love must be somewhere along this stream. I went up the river to look for him, but the way was difficult and long. I went down the stream to look for him, and there in mid-water sure enough, it's he. The sound of the guqin was like water, both music and song were beautiful. To be able to be described as a woman of wonder in this era, not only did she have to possess an amiable personality, but more important, required great musical talents. Every single word was absolutely crisp, every tone was sweet. Sounding to the ears. As the sound of Yun Qingwu's guqin began to play, the ladies in green dresses also began to dance, occasionally coming together to form a blooming flower, and occasionally coming together to form the ripples of flowing water. Every scholar was mesmerized by the scene in front of them, completely intoxicated by this incomparable music and dance. All of their eyes were filled with enchantment, indulging themselves in the most beautiful sounds of the world. The youth also quieted down, carefully listening to Yun Qingwu's voices, and didn't make a further sound. On the other hand, Yan Xiu remained seated on his chair as usual, his expression calm, lightly fanning himself. It seemed as if he was listening, and at the same time also seemed like he wasn't. The song ended. The Guqin stopped. Yet, the lingering sound continued to echo throughout the air. Nobody knew how much time had passed before the scholars finally snapped out of their mesmer. What a beautiful piece! The piece was beautiful, the person even more so. To have listened to Yun Qingwu's piece, I am willing to live 10 years less. The crowd of scholars began to use the best praises they could think of to express their deep emotions. There were even scholars who began to stir, preparing to hand over the poems that they had already written to win a smile from the beautiful lady. Huayan Meng residence, Meng Yushu. Having heard such divine music, I am extremely grateful. I wish to leverage on this opportunity to play a piece together with Lady Qingwu. What do you think? At this moment, wearing a yellow embroidered robe, Meng Yushu finally walked out from the crowd. Accompanied by a few bodyguards, he arrived below the stage. When the scholars heard Meng Yushu's words, they instantly began to swear silently. Meng Yushu didn't offer pearls, nor offer jades, nor offer poems, yet he wanted to play a duet with Yun Qingwu. It was obviously to win her heart. What a brilliant move. But, this move was still rather despicable. Considering Yun Qingwu's temperament, it was naturally hard to decline in front of everybody. This way, he would have a huge advantage. To be able to play a piece with Yun Qingwu, this honor and glory would definitely give him something to talk about next time. As the scholars thought about this, Yun Qingwu stood up slowly, her expression calm as water. Since young Master Meng is so defined, Yun Qingwu won't refuse. But, I had already played the piece The Reeds and Rushes. If I played the same genre of songs, I am afraid the rest of the scholars might lose their interest. But, I have an ancient piece surrounded on all sides here. If young master can play it together with these two maids by my side, Qingwu would naturally play a piece together with young master. Yun Qingwu's voice was crisp and clear, neither harsh nor vulgar, neither advancing nor retreating, yet, when her voice landed, Meng Yushu's face instantly changed. He only wished to leverage on this advantage today to ensure that Yun Qingwu wouldn't be able to object. If he really had to play a piece on the stage, it would only be playing for fun, even though it wasn't as if he completely didn't know how to play, but if it was an ancient piece, he would definitely be a huge disgrace. Meng Yushu instantly felt an urge to jump into the river of trust. He couldn't advance, but he also couldn't retreat. Agree. The other party would only let her two maids play the Guqin with him. If he really could play the piece, Yun Qingwu would perform a duet with him. But what if he couldn't play it? Then he would be a big joke in the 100-flower gathering. Meng Yushu didn't speak, but the scholars who had cursed silently at him had guessed what he was thinking as well, and began to snicker. Young Master Meng, play a piece. Yeah, young Master Meng, let me see how good young Master Meng's Guqin skills are. In front of beautiful women, there would definitely be a mysterious force that made some scholars who originally wouldn't dare to open their mouths muster their courage, even if it was only to be noticed by the beautiful woman, or even just glanced at. Meng Yushu's expression changed from red to white, then back to red. His legs moved. He wanted to walk forwards, but ultimately resisted the temptation. Finally gritting his teeth, he waved at Yun Qingwu. Even if they are only Lady Qingwu's maids, I believe they had the fortune to be infected with Lady Qingwu's divine voice. If I managed to match their standards today, I believe it wouldn't be good. Let's leave it at that then. Meng Yushu didn't wait for Yun Qingwu to speak and instantly returned back to his seat like he was escaping. Just like a gust of wind. Thank you, young Master Meng, for your modest decline. Yun Qingwu represents my two maids to express my gratitude. Yun Qingwu seemed to have felt everything was expected, and instead, holding on to the two maids beside her, bowed slightly towards Meng Yushu. When the scholars witnessed this scene, they once again swore silently at Meng Yushu for being able to escape so fast. He ran once he realized things weren't going well, yet he still sounded so dignified and pompous. He was indeed a scoundrel. But, after Meng Yushu's experience, those scholars who stubbornly wished to try to win this beautiful woman's heart and unveil her veil began to worry. Even Meng Yushu was defeated. Who else in this place would be able to unveil Yun Qingwu's veil? All of them were hesitant, looking around at each other. Right at this time, a rather indolent voice suddenly sounded out. Beauty Yun Qingwu. The scholars were taken aback, thinking who else had decided to bring shame to himself. Then, they realized where the sound came from. It was the youth sitting beside Yan Xiu. Country bumpkin. He really wishes to unveil Yun Qingwu's veil. With his capabilities. The scholars felt that he was simply despicable. Yun Qingwu had traversed the great Xia dynasty and experienced God knew how many storms. The northern desert, the southern nation, the western Liang and the eastern metropolis, yet, not a single scholar had ever caused her heart to waver. A country bumpkin, what abilities could he have? At this moment, Yan Xiu's gaze shifted to the youth beside him, the look in his eyes having a hint of change for the first time. But it was only change, very quickly, it disappeared and returned back to normal. The youth on the other hand seemed to have simply not heard the discussion going on around him. Standing up from his seat, he casually walked towards the stage. The blue coarse robe flapped slightly in the gentle wind. Turns out that it's young master, Yun Qingwu greets young master once again. Watching the slowly approaching youth, Yun Qingwu's expression seemed to have not changed much. Lowering her head slightly, she gave a gentle bow. Today, I made a bet with the person just now whose name was Meng Yushu. The youth walked in front of Yun Qingwu, his jet-black eyes silently staring at the beautiful woman in front of him. This bet that young master made, is related to Yun Qingwu. Yun Qingwu didn't seem surprised at all. Exactly. The youth nodded. Yun Qingwu brazenly takes a guess, this bet young master made with young master Meng, is about who can unveil this veil from Yun Qingwu's face. Yun Qingwu's expression was calm as water. Smart. The youth nodded again. Since this is the case, young master must definitely be an outstanding person. Even though Yun Qingwu is untalented, I still wish to invite young master to teach me. Yun Qingwu bowed once again. All right. The youth experienced the faint yet delicate fragrance emanated by Yun Qingwu's body, and similar took a bow towards Yun Qingwu. Then, extending his hand, a piece of black cloth ended up on his right hand. Actually, I prefer things to be a little simpler, a little more direct. The youth looked at the cloth on his hands that was still slightly warm, and then gave a radiant smile towards Yun Qingwu whose expression was completely stunned. Chapter 55. Not good at socializing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations. The entire world was completely silent at this moment, as if time had stopped. Only the gentle wind at the riverside of the River of Trust continued to blow lightly. At the same time, a face of absolute beauty appeared in front of the youth's eyes. In the ancient times, there were beauties that hid the moon and shamed the flowers, sunk the fishes and alighted the birds. Yet, Yun Qingwu didn't fall behind them. With her long, curved eyebrows, bright pupils, snow-white skin, her lips fainting showing a shade of red, like the most breath-taking stroke of brush in a vast snowy landscape. Except at this moment, this face of absolutely beauty, was in a state of complete shock. Her delicate lips were slightly agape, and disbelief filled her bright pupils. Not only did Yun Qingwu not dare to believe, the maids beside her at this moment also stood with their mouths agape and their eyes wide open. Staring at this youth in front of them, they were simply unable to react. Too fast. In a flash, the veil on Yun Qingwu's face had appeared in the hands of this youth. It felt as if that piece of cloth had never even left the youth's hands. Below the stage, even Yan Xiu's constant ice-cold expression also seemed incredible at this moment. His thin lips opened and shut and opened, his eyes filled with a look of disbelief. Most exaggerated of all was Meng Yushu. His eyes were round and wide opened, a fist instinctively stuffed into his mouth. His two cheeks were so stuffed that it even reddened, yet he didn't realize. The expressions of the scholars that were previously jeering were now completely frozen at this moment. Silence. Nobody made a sound. Because nobody could ever imagine that something like that had just happened. Not too bad. The reeds and the rushes. How could you not be able to pursue that man? Looks like lady is burdened with a worry. The youth looked at Yun Qingwu, and sighed unexpectedly. Then, he turned around and walked down the stage. Walking directly to Yan Xiu's side, he picked up the 100 taels silver note beside Yan Xiu's hand and caressed it, his face beaming delightedly. Everybody has seen it, I have already unveiled the veil, this silver note naturally belongs to me. After finishing his sentence, the youth kept the 100 taels silver note into his pocket and strolled away into the distance, perfectly contented. Yun Qingwu's veil has been removed. Unveiled just like that. This is too beautiful. She can collapse a city with one look, then collapse a country. Wait a minute. Did he say silver note? Even though the scholars' hearts were shocked upon facing such a situation, but after seeing Yun Qingwu's absolute beauty, they were completely mesmerized. After a long time, somebody finally managed to react. Catch him. Quick, catch that lecher. After their initial, what erupted was fury that filled the heaven. At this moment, the hearts of the scholars were completely ignited, nobody bothered about the rules of the 100-flower gathering anymore. In broad daylight, within the heaven and earth, he had actually dared to commit such an errant act. Furthermore, he had even blasphemed the purest goddess in their hearts. If this could be tolerated, what could not? Where is he? Where did he run to? The scholars began to search everywhere, yet unfortunately, the youth had already disappeared without a trace. Not even his shadow could be seen in the scene of the 100-flower gathering. How could you not be able to pursue that man? Yun Qingwu managed to regain her composure at this moment. Looking at the direction the youth had disappeared into, her lips parted slightly. Nobody knew whether it was due to anger, or something she had suddenly thought of, but her face actually revealed a faint smile. This scene instantly stunned the angry scholars once again. She was indeed endowed with a natural beauty that was impossible to hide. Pack up, let's leave. The smile of Yun Qingwu's face disappeared in a flash. Instead of covering her face with the veil again, she walked back slowly towards the pleasure boat at the riverside, her expression completely calm. Yes, lady. As Yun Qingwu left, the 100-flower gathering came to a close, leaving a bunch of scholars cracking their fists, swearing that they would find that lecher and take revenge for shaming Yun Qingwu. What a lad, Meng Yushu, will definitely not let you off. Meng Yushu felt his slightly painful face. Gripping the sword on his hand tightly, an icy glint glowed in his eyes. On the other hand, Yan Xiu was also nowhere to be seen, as if he had vanished in thin air. On the pleasure boat, Yun Qingwu sat quietly on a red sandalwood crafted chair, with a red desk in front of her. A guqin lay on the desk in front of her, and beside the guqin, a bronze, animal-shaped censer emanated a faint floral aroma. Lady, servant is curious about one thing. A maid dressed in a golden long skirt standing beside Yun Qingwu looked at her and asked softly. You want to ask me why didn't I dodge? Yes, given lady's enlightenment state, if you didn't wish to. Who would be able to unveil your veil? What if I said I dodged? This. He looks like he's only around 15 or 16 years of age. That's right, only 15 or 16 years of age. The maid didn't speak any further, but her expression was truly horrified. Yun Qingwu similarly didn't speak, her bright pupils silently gazing at the ripples on the river surface. Within the Huaiyan County, in an alley 100 meters away from the western city gate, a youth wearing a coarse blue robe was stopped in his tracks by a youth wearing a fine robe. Behind the finely clothed youth, a strong bearded man followed riding on a 3-eyed scarlet flame tiger. Robbery. The youth looked at the strong bearded man behind the finely clothed youth, then looked at the three-eyed scarlet flame tiger he sat on. The edges of his mouth curved into something that seemed like a smile, his expression remaining calm and composed. No. The finely clothed youth shook his head. Then, can you let me pass? The youth continued to ask patiently. No. The finely clothed youth was just as patient. The youth didn't say anything further, and silently eyed the two people in front of him. The edges of his mouth all along curved into a smile, and stood just like that on the spot. Yan Xiu. The finely clothed youth waited for a while, then finally spoke again. Fang Zhengji. When the youth heard Yan Xiu speak, he wiped the smile off his face for the first time, appearing somewhat serious. I'm not good at socializing, but I am quite curious about you. When Yan Xiu finished his sentence, it seemed rather challenging for him, as if it was the first time he had said so many words in one breath. Unfortunately, I am not interested in men. Fang Zhengji twitched his mouth. Blocked by a stranger youth, who then shouted that he was very interested in him. No matter how he looked at the situation, it didn't seem very normal. Or, this person called Yan Xiu in front of him, like he said, really wasn't good at socializing. Yan Xiu's expression changed, as if he was somewhat disappointed at Fang Zhengji's words. This was the first time he had taken the initiative to interact with a stranger, yet he was rejected. Give up. This thought instantly disappeared. Because, in Yan Xiu's dictionary, these two words, give up, didn't exist. Then, he thought of the advice his grandfather gave to him before he embarked on his journey. When interacting with others, especially when it was the first interaction, he should be sincerer. I can give you some money. Yan Xiu thought of the delighted smile on Fang Zhengji's face when he picked up the 100 taels of silver, and felt that he could express his sincerity a bit more. The strong bearded man behind Yan Xiu shifted slightly. Looking at Yan Xiu, his expression turned awkward. He felt that his young master was really about to hit a wall today. Because, after uttering such words, as long as it was a scholar, he would definitely be infuriated. Sure, then can you treat me to a meal? When Fang Zhengji heard, he didn't even stop to think before quickly accepting his offer. I can. Yan Xiu nodded. Then, let's go. With somebody to treat him to a meal, Fang Zhengji became enthusiastic and quickly walked towards Yan Xiu. Then, shoulder to shoulder, they began to walk out of the alley. The bearded strong man looked at these two people in front of him. His expression instantly became extremely strange. His mouth was opened widely, and stared till his eyeballs almost popped out. Then, he finally sighed. It seems that my young master is actually very good at socializing. Chapter 56. Double Dragon Roll Champion. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations. The Drunken Immortal Restaurant was already the best restaurant in the Huaiyan County. But, today was clearly much livelier than before. Except, this liveliness seemed to feel more like noise and clamor. Get that lecher out, I saw him go in. Yes, today I swear I will fight that lecher with my life. If I don't kill that lecher, I am not human. A crowd of scholars dressed in brocade clothes blocked the entrance of the Drunken Immortal Restaurant, shouting at the top of their voices. Yet, nobody really dared to cross that doorstep. Because at the door, there was a three-eyed scarlet flame tiger, and a strong bearded man. A few scholars who weren't afraid of death had already tried. At this moment, they were lying on the ground, groaning continuously, serving as an effective warning to others. As the cause of the commotion, Fang Zhengji still seemed rather good. Sitting in a private room on the second level beside the window, he could see clearly the scene unfolding on the streets below the building, hence, he naturally saw how extreme the strong bearded man's actions were. The exquisite dishes on the table had been more or less finished, yet the wine they drank was extremely little. Both Fang Zhengji and Yan Xiu, seeming to have a great rapport with each other, stopped at tasting, and didn't drink further. Furthermore, in what seemed like an even greater rapport, after the dishes were served, they hadn't even spoke a single word. It felt as if they were extremely close friends. Finishing their food, Yan Xiu paid the bill, as if everything was only to be expected. Then, Yan Xiu fished out a silver note and passed it towards Fang Zhengji. Here. Fang Zhengji received it, took a look, realized that it was 1,000 silver note, smiled, and pushed the note back to Yan Xiu. Yan Xiu was puzzled, but didn't take the initiative to ask. We are now already friends. Fang Zhengji smiled. Even though this Yan Xiu's outward appearance was as cold as an ice cube, but inside, he was as pure as a white piece of paper. Grandfather said, I must be sincere towards my friends. Yan Xiu was confused. What your grandfather said is right. Friends must indeed be sincere towards one another. Since you have already treated me to a meal, as an exchange, I can answer some of your questions. Fang Zhengji continued to smile. I wanted to know why did you employ such a method to unveil Yun Qingwu's veil? Yan Xiu looked at Fang Zhengji and asked the question that had been in his heart all along. Because, I prefer things to be a little simpler, and a little more direct. Fang Zhengji replied earnestly. Aren't you afraid of being misunderstood as a lecher? Yan Xiu continued to ask. Since even you said it's a misunderstanding, what do I have to be afraid of? Fang Zhengji answered with his own question. That's true. Yan Xiu earnestly pondered over Fang Zhengji's words, then, nodded his head. Let's go. All right. The two people walked down the building side by side, then, shoulder to shoulder, walked towards the doorstep of the Drunken Immortal restaurant. Fang Zhengji swaggered out of the Drunken Immortal restaurant, yet, those scholars that previously wanted to fight Fang Zhengji with their life didn't move at all. Because, beside Fang Zhengji, stood Yan Xiu. Nobody was stupid enough to fight Yan Xiu with their lives, because, that was simply giving their life away. All of the scholars watched with their mouths closed, as if they had swallowed a fly, their eyes filled with disbelief. Yan Xiu actually walked together with this lecher. This lecher is only a country bumpkin, why would the great Yan Xiu associate himself with him? They were simply people from two different worlds. The scholars didn't dare to believe, but, from what was unfolding before their eyes, it seemed that the lecher and Yan Xiu were truly good friends. Because, they walked shoulder to shoulder. Afterwards, an even more ridiculous scene occurred. The lecher actually bid goodbye to Yan Xiu at the Drunken Immortal restaurant doorstep, and even exchanged a proper nobleman's expression of courtesy. They really know each other. That's not possible, they didn't even exchange a sentence in the 100-flower gathering. Then, that exchange of courtesy just now. Furthermore, they walked out together from the Drunken Immortal restaurant. Nobody was able to understand this, because, there was simply nobody who would believe that the great Yan Xiu would eat with a person he knew for less than an hour, and even paying the bill. Then, they recalled the scene when Fang Zhengji appeared in the 100-flower gathering, and thought of polite and respectful state of Meng Yushu after he stood up from being pulled down by Fang Zhengji. Suddenly, they seemed to have understood something. When Fang Zhengji left, nobody followed anymore. Because, they knew that even if Fang Zhengji was really a lecher, they were definitely not capable of becoming his enemy. Exiting from the Huai'an County West Gate, a blue-silver scale horse had appeared under Fang Zhengji. Its name was very domineering, but compared to the snow-treading dragon stallion, its height, weight and lineage was definitely no match. The reason it was called Silver Scale was very simple. Because on this horse's forehead, there was a triangular piece of silver scale. There was ultimately some lineage behind it, at least it managed to grow a piece of scale. But what use was that? It could only be used for show. Ride. A light cry sounded, and the silver scale horse began to dash after exiting the gate, leaving a cloud of dust in its wake as it ran along the narrow horse lane, and crossed over the numerous plots of land that were filled with hope. After galloping wildly for a total of 3 hours, the glaring sun that hung up high in the skies began to set gradually. A barely discernible village in the faint mist began to slowly appear in front of Fangjingji. This village's name was Northern Mountain Village. Jingji is back. Sneaking off to the county again. Village chief is waiting for you. Watching Fangjingji appear, they greeted him enthusiastically. After all, within these few years, Fangjingji's contribution to the Northern Mountain Village spoke for itself. All right. Fangjingji called out in reply, then urged his horse, galloped towards a courtyard with a stone-built two-storied house and stopped. It was perfectly squarish, designed personally by Fangjingji, and built by the combined efforts of the villagers of Southern Village. It was strong, sturdy, shielded the wind and blocked the rain, and its appearance and ventilation were all top-notch. Once he entered the small courtyard, Fangjingji immediately brought the silver scale horse into the stable. Jingji is back, have you eaten? A concerned voice sounded out. Immediately after, a woman dressed in a green long skirt walked out from the stone house within the courtyard. Her silky long hair lightly draped over her shoulders, her skin was white as snow and her features were like a painting. From the outside, she looked at most 20.4 to 20.5, and didn't seem like a person over 30 years of age at all. This person was Qin Shuolian. I have more or less eaten. Fangjingji walked to Qin Shuolian's side and moved his face in front of Qin Shuolian. Qin Shuolian instantly leaned over and gave Fangjingji a kiss, then a satisfied expression appeared on her face. Turning around and pulling along Fangjingji, she walked into the house. Fangjingji could only accept this helplessly. Because this was only of Qin Shuolian's hobby, one that persisted since young till now. She had to give him a kiss. Eat a little more, Mom had made some nice food for you. Your uncle Yang Ping had also delivered quite a few animals to our house, that underground storeroom you made is almost completely full. Qin Shuolian nagged. Oh, then I should indeed eat more, where's Dad? When Fangjingji entered the house, he didn't see Fang Hao at home. He's having a chat at Uncle Yang Ping's house, he seems to be waiting for you. But you don't have to rush, it's not too late to go over after finishing your food. As Qin Shuolian spoke, she carried out a bowl of steaming meat broth and placed it in front of Fangjingji. Fangjingji inhaled and savored the aroma. Qin Shuolian's culinary skills were top-notch. These few years in the Northern Mountain Village, Fangjingji ate really well, except, this Uncle Yang Ping who was now the village chief wanted to find him today. It seemed that he who comes is surely ill-intentioned. The law of Tao examinations, I have already waited 8 years, it's about time. Fangjingji finished the last mouthful of soup in the bowl, looked at the bright moonlight outside his window, and a name suddenly appeared in his mind. Qi Gaian, Hidden Dragon Roll, Rising Dragon Roll, Double Dragon Roll Champion. Fully deserving of being the #1 scholar in the entire younger generation of the Great Xia dynasty, she is truly incredible. Chapter 57. Heaven Dao. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations. The birds soared up high into the sky, and the lonely clouds drifted leisurely across the skies. Within craggy mountain stones, on a 1,000 feet high cliff, a huge golden hall was stood. On the outside, which was decorated with pristine white jade tiles established among the lush green trees, countless gifted scholars and beautiful ladies dressed in white walked about. In front of the huge golden hall, a piece of pitch-black tablet stood proudly in the mountains, on it imprinted 2 large words. Heaven Dao. Missus, there's a message from the constabulary. Behind the large hall, outside a quiet wooden attic, a lady dressed in a green long skirt, a green jade hairpin in her hair, waited carefully outside the doorstep. Speak. Within the attic, a crisp voice sounded out. Even though it was only 1 word, but when it entered people's ears, it sounded as clear as the cries of 100 birds. 10 days later, it would be the Duan King's 20-year-old celebration feast. The Lord wishes that Mrs. would attend. The lady instantly replied. Reject. The voice sounded once again from within the attic. As usual, there was only one word. Yes, Mrs. When the lady heard this, she didn't dare to ask any further and quickly withdrew. After the lady backed away, a faint sigh came from within the attic. Sigh. Father Lord's method of dealing with things are always so extreme. People said that me achieving the double dragon roll champion was to assist my father, yet who would know that this was only to protect him. In the northern mountain village, within a small stone courtyard, a huge animal hanged on a huge wooden rack. Below the animal, a bonfire was burning strong, and a rich aroma wafted in the air. Howd, these ingredients are about to be finished. You need to ask that child Jingji to get more for me, else you will have nothing to eat next time. Beside the bonfire, a man with a few strands of silver hair laughed as he swallowed down a bowl of wine. Ha ha. You have to tell him this yourself, I can't make this decision. Fong Howd, sitting beside the man, was also holding a bowl of wine at this moment. Except, one of his arm was completely made out of a certain white-colored metal. Dad, Uncle Yangping. At this moment, a rather indolent voice called out from outside the courtyard. Ah, Jingji is here. Quick, sit down and accompany uncle to drink. When the man with a few strands of silver hair heard this voice, his eyes instantly lit up and hurriedly walked out to welcome him in. This was the previous Northern Mountain Village hunting squad deputy captain, and now the village chief of the Northern Mountain Village, Zhang Yangping. Accompany you to drink. I have no interest in that. Here, ingredients. Outside the courtyard, Fang Jingji, wearing a coarse blue robe, instantly revealed a look of disdain after hearing Zhang Yangping's words, and casually threw a huge bag of ingredients to Zhang Yangping. Zhang Yangping instantly caught it with both hands, as if it was treasure, and beamed even more delightedly. Ha ha ha. Jingji indeed knows me well. Zhang Yangping quickly kept the ingredients and pulled Fang Jingji to sit down beside the bonfire. Jingji, I have discussed with your dad, and the entire village had agreed. From now on, you will be the captain of the hunting squad. Captain. Isn't it deputy captain? Fang Jingji asked curiously. Howd, look at your son, ahaha. How can he be a deputy captain? Of course he must be a proper captain. Furthermore, please don't run off outside again, after all, I am already old. There are some matters in the village which you have to familiarize yourself with sooner or later. Zhang Yangping laughed, his expression looked as if he was blaming Fang Jingji. Yet, he was secretly analyzing the change in Fang Jingji's expression. Uncle Yangping, why don't you consider brotherly? Fang Jingji's expression didn't change much, and continued to smile faintly. That kid, how can he compare to you? Zhang Yangping waved his hands. I admit I can't compare to brother Jingji, but I definitely can win you. An unconvinced voice came from within the stone house. Then, a youth with a tough and stocky build walked out, his hands carrying 2 jugs of wine. Ah, stupid boy, you dare to act tough in front of your dad. Come, let's compare today. When Zhang Yangping heard this, he instantly stood up and received the jug of wine from the youth and prepared to pour. Stop acting, Uncle Yangping. I know the reason why you called me here today. Fang Jingji eyed the people in front of him, twitched his mouth and felt rather helpless. Ha ha. Zhang Yangping laughed, a somewhat awkward expression appearing on his face. That law of Dao examination is too difficult, furthermore you self-studied these few years. Look at those people in the southern mountain village, they had studied for so many years, yet nobody was able to pass the capital's law of Dao examination. That's right, brother Jingji. No matter how powerful you are, even if you are not able to pass the theory examination, it would still be useless. At this moment, the stocky youth at the side urged. How about, wait another 2 years? Zhang Yangping probed. If I didn't remember wrongly, 2 years ago, Uncle Yangping seemed to have said that same thing. Fang Zhengji walked up to the bonfire and slid his hand across the prey, and a huge chunk of meat ended up in his heads. Placing it in his mouth and chewing, his mouth filled with oil. Even though that's true, but, you have also seen, there were many bouts of continuous droughts these few years, the animals on the Cangling mountain also seem to have become lesser and lesser. Furthermore, the population of the village has been increasing. That's why there is a greater need to participate in the law of Dao examinations. As long as I can pass, then we can be exempted from tax. Fang Zhengji interrupted Zhang Yangping's sentence midway. But there's no way you would be able to pass. The law of Dao examinations, from the county examinations, to the capital examinations, at least a few months is required to finish the examinations. If you leave, I am afraid that the village. A look of worry appeared on Zhang Yangping's face. Uncle Yangping, here is a silver note, it will be able to support the village for a while. When Fang Zhengji finished speaking, he fished out 100 silver note and handed it over. This is 100 taels. Zhang Yangping received the silver note from Fang Zhengji's hands, his face full of doubt. Then, looking at the note, his jaws instantly dropped, his face filled with disbelief. Ha ha ha. Actually, Brother Yangping need not worry. I still have some savings at home, if the village comes to any harm, you just have to tell me. Fang Hao looked at the silver note on Zhang Yangping's hands, then looked at Fang Zhengji, a smile appearing on his face. Zhang Yangping sighed. Fang Zhengji knew, from this sigh onwards, his journey towards the law of Dao examinations had officially begun. For these 8 years, the village had been constantly against him participating in the law of Dao examinations. Fang Zhengji also didn't forcefully participate. After all, he could leave easily, but his parents in the village would be scolded. Even though after the examinations, the scolding towards his parents would disappear, but when he thought of the scene 8 years ago when his parents were exiled from the southern mountain village, he couldn't bear to let his parents suffer like that anymore. Not even for a day. As such, he had to seek Zhang Yangping's agreement. And in order to ensure that his parents or the village would have any fantasies, even when he occasionally entered the city, he would never ask about matters related to the law of Dao examinations. Anyway, Fang Zhengji felt that as long as he participated, he would definitely pass. Rules. Were they even important? On the second morning, news of Fang Zhengji intending to participate in the law of Dao examinations spread like a wild gust of wind throughout the entire northern mountain village. Each and every household began to discuss the news, even the southern mountain village across the mountain had also received the news. Fang Zhengji is going to participate in the law of Dao examinations, did you know? How can I not know? I heard that in order to participate in the law of Dao examinations, this child Zhengji had even specially donated 100 taels of silver to the village. 100 taels. That's incredible. But the law of Dao examinations is impossible to pass, sigh. But since Zhengji is so determined, and wants to take a look, we can treat it as him taking some time off to go see the world. Obviously it is to see the world. What else? Don't tell me he still can pass. Ha ha ha. If self-studying can make one pass the law of Dao examinations, I will instantly finish eating the entire patch of pumpkins at my house. Ha ha ha, your pumpkin patch contains a few thousand pounds of pumpkins, can you finish eating it? I promise I will finish it in a day, ha ha ha. Chapter 58. Registration Qualifications. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations. As the Northern Mountain Village villagers discussed about Fang Zhengji's participation in the law of Dao examinations, the Southern Mountain Village had started an emergency meeting. Ding Qingshan's expression seemed rather ugly. In reality, after he knew that Fang Jingji had shifted to the northern mountain village, his expression had never been happy. Because, within the time of less than a month, almost the entire outskirts of the Zhangling mountain had been occupied by the northern mountain village. Ding Qingshan had tried to think of other ideas, but unfortunately, they were completely useless. After which, he had even considered informing the Divine Constabulary about Fang Jingji's whereabouts so that the Divine Constabulary would take him away. Unfortunately, within the entire 8 years, the Divine Constabulary had never again set foot upon the southern mountain village. He had also mentioned this to the Hall of Dao's Sir, Wang Anhua, but Wang Anhua only smiled. Nobody knew that Wang Anhua had already informed the Divine Constabulary a long time ago. Hence, the only reply he received was these 3 words, "I don't know. Today is the 8th year, if we can't pass again this time, then." Ding Qingshan seemed rather anxious, because he remembered very clearly the scene from 8 years ago. "Brother Qingshan, don't worry. This time, I have full confidence. Furthermore, Hure is also well prepared, I am confident that he will pass the county examinations." Li Zhuangshi's voice rang out. Ding Qingshan looked at Li Zhuangshi and nodded. Just as the previous village chief, Meng Bai, expected, even though Li Zhuangshi indeed stepped out of his boundaries 8 years ago, but he was indeed the southern mountain village's only hope. Because, within these 8 years, Li Zhuangshi was the only person who had successfully passed the county law of Dao examinations. He just needed to enter the first-class role in the capital examinations in order to achieve success. What do you feel about the possibility of Fang Jingji passing the law of Dao examinations? Ding Qingshan looked at the crowd once again and expressed his worries. Impossible. Li Zhuangshi promised. Brotherly, how can you be so sure? Ding Qingshan knew that there was resentment between Li Zhuangshi and Fang Jingji. After hearing Li Zhuangshi's words, he was indeed dubious. If we talk about the combat examinations, Fang Jingji would definitely be able to pass the county law of Dao examination. But for the theory examination, he would definitely not be able to pass. How can a person who self-studies understand the words of the wise men? What he read is only surface level. Furthermore, there are 2 rounds of theory examinations in the county. If he isn't able to pass these 2 rounds, he won't even have the opportunity to participate in the combat examinations. Li Zhuangshi explained to Ding Qingshan. But what if? Ding Qingshan was still slightly uneasy. There is no what if. Going back a million steps, even if he really had the capability of passing the law of Dao examinations, he would still not be able to pass it. Brother Qingshan, don't worry. Li Zhuangshi seemed very sure of himself. Why is that? Ding Qingshan asked puzzledly. Because, he doesn't even have the qualifications to register for it. Li Zhuangshi laughed out loud coldly. It was already one day before the law of Dao examinations. The sun rose up high in the sky. After breakfast, Fang Jingji casually packed his luggage in the small courtyard, and outside the small courtyard, there was a crowd of villagers pointing things out. Jingji, aren't you going to participate in the examinations? Why haven't you left yet? That's right, the sun is about to reach its highest point. I saw that the southern mountain village's side had already left once the sky started to brighten. Don't you need to reach the county early to make preparations? The villagers, enthusiastically, inquired Fang Jingji, even though their tone wasn't very nice, but their faces were filled with smiles. They didn't have any ill intent at all. I have completed my preparations. Fang Jingji smiled and mounted the silver scale horse. Qin Shulian once again ran out from within the house, holding a few big bags of roasted meat wrapped in yellow paper. Jingji, take these meats to eat on your journey, don't be hungry. Okay, thanks Mom. Fang Jingji received it and then lightly pulled the horse reins. The silver scale horse let out a delighted, low neigh, then gradually made its way around the villagers, and strode unhurriedly towards the entrance of the village. Sister Xuoyan, don't worry, Jingji will come back within a few days, he won't take too long. That's right, I heard the theory exam in the law of Tao examinations is really hard. If Jingji can't pass the theory examinations, he can return right after. That's of course. That's great. After a few days I can follow brother Jingji up the mountains to hunt again. The villagers discussed spiritedly, even Qin Shuoyan wasn't angered when she heard these chattering. I believe he still might be lucky and somehow make it past the first round with his cleverness. Ha ha ha. The villagers laughed and then dispersed. When Fang Jingji, who hadn't journeyed too far away, heard Qin Shuoyan's words, he almost fell off the silver scale horse and didn't feel very good. Mum, you are my mum. Ride. After leaving the village, Fang Jingji increased his pace. Even though the silver scale horse wasn't as noble as the snow-treading dragon stallion, he still had to spend 20 silver pieces in order to purchase it. The entire northern mountain village only had this one horse, and the southern mountain village. Naturally it was impossible that it would have won. If not for the silver scale horse, Fang Jingji would be forced to painstakingly follow the southern mountain village, journeying in the dark before the sun even rose. The happiness he felt now didn't need any further mentioning. Galloping wildly the entire way. Around 2 kilometers from the Huaiyan County, Fang Jingji encountered the group of people from the southern mountain village rushing to participate in the examinations. Li Huer, who was the same age as Fang Jingji, was also among the group. He wore a short robe, with his thick eyebrows and sturdy, dark figure, he bore some resemblance to Li Zhuangshi. Oh, Fang Jingji, you really intend to participate in the law of Tao examinations? Li Huer just happened to turn around, and instantly saw Fang Jingji riding the silver scale horse. Even though his tone was sour, but when he saw the silver scale horse, he was filled with envy. That's right. Fang Jingji halted the silver scale horse and rode alongside Li Huer and the rest of the group. Jingji, even though there is some misunderstanding between our families, but we indeed still have the bond of being from the same village. I see you have also grown up, but this law of Tao examinations is not the same as hunting on the mountains, it is too difficult. Unfortunately, I still have to prepare for the capital examinations, else I can take some time off to help you out a bit. Li Zhuangshi looked at Fang Jingji and instantly assumed the position of a senior. In his heart, after this capital law of Tao examinations, he would likely be recruited into the divine constabulary, and his future would be limitless. Uncle Li, in this capital examination, I hope you don't screw up again. Fang Jingji smiled lightly, and pulled the horse's reins. The silver scale horse brayed loudly and galloped off into the distance, leaving behind a cloud of swirling dust. Li Zhuangshi choked on a mouthful of horse-hoof mud, and coughed violently. Dad, why didn't you tell him about the law of Tao examinations qualification requirements just now? Li Huer initially wanted to speak, but was interrupted by Li Zhuangshi, hence he was somewhat puzzled. What do you know? Fang Jingji has too many tricks up his sleeves. I am afraid that if I tell him that now, with his cleverness, he might actually really think of an idea. Hence, the later he knows the better. When he is unable to enter the examination venue, he can only gloomily return back to the village, ha ha ha. Li Zhuangshi gazed at the vanishing Fang Jingji and laughed. Dad is indeed smart. Once Dad passes this capital examinations, you will be able to enter the divine constabulary. When the time comes, you must make sure Fang Jingji suffers the consequences. Li Huer beamed with pride. Nonsense. You better remember this, Fang Jingji is not our enemy. When Li Zhuangshi heard Li Huer's words, his expression instantly changed. Why isn't Fang Jingji our enemy? I don't quite understand. Li Huer was rather confused. Because his dad and your dad grew up together. We also entered the hunting squad together. Sigh. The truth is, 8 years ago, I did that only because I was afraid of Fang Jingji snatching your spot in the Hall of Tao. But in the end, he simply didn't need to snatch your place in the Hall of Tao. Hence, the Li family ultimately owes the Fong family. But, even though I don't wish to harm him, I also don't wish for him to become stronger. Li Zhuangshi looked at Li Huer's confused expression, and felt rather resentful that Li Huer didn't meet his expectations. These few years, even though Fang Zhengji had occupied the Cangling mountain outskirts, with some intention of becoming king of the mountain, but he didn't completely eradicate everyone. Else, how can the southern mountain village survive till now? I understand. Li Huer nodded. Uncle Li is right, even though my grandfather lost his position as village chief because of Fang Zhengji, but I don't hate him. Within the crowd, a youth who was slightly older than Li Huer spoke. It was Meng Bai's grandson, Meng Jiangshan. The law of Dao examination registration had already begun a month ago, even though it was only a day away from the law of Dao examinations, but the registration area was completely desolated. Hence, without even queuing at all, Fang Zhengji stood in front of the registration official. Registration. Hall of Dao token, Hall of Dao recommendation letter. The registration official was yawning at this moment and prepared to pack up after an hour. When he suddenly heard someone wanting to register, then looking at the coarse blue robe the other party wore, he became slightly annoyed. Hall of Dao token. Recommendation letter. What are those? Fang Zhengji's face was filled with puzzlement. Chapter 59. Iron Fist Method. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations. But confusion was confusion. Fang Zhengji still managed to react quickly. Regarding things like God of Doors blocking the way, he was rather familiar. In a flash, he played along and prepared to unleash his Iron Fist method. Then, Fang Zhengji pretended to search about his body, until the other party started to become annoyed, then flashed a smile he believed was very bright at the registration official. Lord Official, I seem to have forgotten, I was rushing to register, please accommodate me this time and if you don't have the Hall of Dao token and recommendation letter, you cannot register. The registration official shook his head without a second thought. I really forgot to bring, and my village is far away, I can't make it in time. Fang Zhengji's eyes darted, and out of the blue, a piece of broken silver dropped out from within his sleeves. This was the essence of his Iron Fist method. Expectedly, the registration official's eyes lit up and his gaze swept across his surroundings. Then, very quickly, he picked up the piece of broken silver. Without the Hall of Dao token and recommendation later, I have no way to enter your name into the list. You really cannot register, go back and take it. The registration official helplessly shook his head, then placed the piece of broken silver back into Fang Zhengji's hands. Having such a tedious job, yet not even being able to keep the silver on his hands, who would be able to understand the pain in his heart? Fang Zhengji was slightly speechless. What happened to the Iron Fist method? What was wrong here? Even silver couldn't be used, that meant he couldn't fool around leisurely anymore. He can't register. After waiting 8 years, he waited to be told that he couldn't register. This is completely illogical. What to do if I can't register? The Fang Zhengji who initially walked along the streets of the Huaiyan County brimming with confidence instantly felt a sense of misery after such an incident. He had to think of an idea. Hall of Dao token, recommendation letter. Isn't this a little too difficult? Don't tell me they can't even give people the responsibility and space for self-studying. They indeed had to attend the Hall of Dao. Fang Zhengji detested this unreasonable rule. Up until now, he had more or less understood why village chief Meng Bai would make such a decision 8 years ago. In this world, if one couldn't even enter the Hall of Dao, how could they even have a chance to pass the law of Dao examinations? But, when I left the village, why did nobody tell me this? Fang Zhengji gazed towards the direction of the northern mountain village and quickly shook his head. The northern mountain village didn't even have a Hall of Dao. Naturally, nobody had ever participated in the law of Dao examinations. This regulation for registering, who would even know it. What to do? If he really wasn't able to register, he definitely couldn't just gloomily return back to the village. No. This kind of problems. I can't do this. Fang Zhengji gritted his teeth. He had already completed, with great difficulty, the job of convincing Zhang Yangping, no matter what he couldn't go back. He had to think of a method to participate. If that really wasn't possible, then make a fake one. But what did the Hall of Dao token and recommendation letter look like? This wasn't very easy to fake. I believe that when I finish making one, the registration area would probably have closed. Wait a minute, since it is already counterfeiting, why don't I directly make a examination card? Fang Zhengji's eyes lit up, and instantly saw a ray of light in the pitch-black darkness. His future was bright. Then, let me find a real examination card to refer to now. Finding a target was simply no challenge at all to Fang Zhengji, no challenge at all. Currently, the Huaiyan County was filled with scholars coming from all over to participate in the Law of Dao examinations, and the biggest assembly areas were naturally restaurants and inns. If he struck at the restaurants, it seemed like a good idea. They were messy and crowded, and one bit of negligence could get him a card. But it would be too hard to return after obtaining it. Ruining people's future after studying painstakingly for so many years was something Fang Zhengji would never do. Hence, he decided to strike at the inns, finding a few luggage at random. No matter what, he should be able to obtain a few examination cards. Coming and going as he pleases, just like the wind. Then, after Fang Zhengji casually assessed a few inns, an examination card was found. Turns out the examination card in this world is simple as such. Fang Zhengji stared at the small squarish paper card on his hands and wanted to swear. Weren't the officials being a little stingy? Things such as photographs naturally didn't exist in this world, even the name was directly written on the card. The only difficulty was the official stamp and the examination number. The official stamp was simple, and was instantly settled within a matter of minutes. Carving out a few exquisite flowers was indeed difficult, but carving out a few words wasn't too much of a problem. As for examination number, Fang Zhengji felt that he could fill in a large number, ensuring that there wouldn't be any repeats and conflicts. Within the time of less than half an hour, everything was settled. Fang Zhengji had even spiritedly made a few extras. Staring at the faked examination cards in his hand, Fang Zhengji sighed silently to himself. Turned out that creating false documents in this world wasn't hard at all. Little did he imagine that for things such as participating in the Law of Dao examinations, who else would even falsify anything? The second day, a cool breeze swept across the surface of the earth, and the sun shone brightly in the sky. It was a good weather. In the early morning, like ants, the scholars participating in the Law of Dao examinations filled up the Qingfeng Academy. As the largest academy in the Huaiyan County, the Qingfeng Academy couldn't be compared to the standard village hall of Dao. It was a place where students in the county studied the Law of Dao and investigated the Dao of all creations. Built with red bricks and glazed tiles, it was wide, spacious and glittering with light. And today, it was used as the theory examination venue for the Law of Dao examination. 2 rows of armored county guards stood guard at the entrance of the Qingfeng Academy, while the scholars waited at the door painstakingly. Within the crowd, Li Huer looked around to find a familiar figure. After a round of searching, he couldn't find any. Ha ha ha, he indeed didn't come. Li Huer laughed happily. But, not too long later, his laughter froze. Because, in the distance, a youth dressed in a coarse blue robe strolled towards his location, humming a little tune. Fang Zhengji, why are you here? Li Huer was slightly unable to believe this. Could it be that the registration counter didn't inform him that he couldn't register without the Hall of Dao token and recommendation letter? Li Zhuangshi and Meng Jiangshan also noticed Fang Zhengji at this moment, each of them revealing a similarly shocked expression. This didn't make sense. At this moment, shouldn't Fang Zhengji be gloomily returning back to the village? I am here to participate in the examinations. Fang Zhengji said in a matter-of fact tone. Obviously, he was here to participate in the examinations, else could it be that he was here to admire the scenery? Examinations. Can you even enter? Li Huer's expression turned into one of despise. He obviously didn't believe that Fang Zhengji really had some way to register successfully. When Fang Zhengji heard this, he instantly understood that Li Huer and the rest should have known that he wasn't qualified to register. But, with the documents in his hand, everything was possible. He didn't bother with such details. I think I can. Fang Zhengji was frank, without a single bit of diffidence. Chapter 60. Sound of the Gong. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Sparrow Translations Editor. Sparrow Translations, can. You think you can? Ha ha ha. How is that possible? Li Huer was slightly taken aback, then immediately after, a wave of laughter erupted. Li Zhuangshi and Meng Jiangshan were also shaking their head, smiling, at this moment. How could a person without even the necessary registration qualifications enter the examination venue? I suppose he didn't even know that the law of Dao examinations required registration in advance. He indeed stayed too long in the village and haven't seen the world, he's too naive. Let's go, I believe there's still some time left. Let's go earn some money first. Li Zhuangshi didn't pay any further attention to Fang Zhengji and instead, led Li Huer and the rest to a spot crowded with people. Earn money. Fang Zhengji's eyes lit up and instantly followed. Very quickly, he saw a huge tree surrounded by people. These people were mostly young masters dressed in flowery clothes. 3 rings of people in the inside, 3 rings on the outside, it indeed seemed very crowded. Guess the roll, the top 3 first-class roll scholars in the theory examinations. Guess correctly and you will earn. A wave of shouting sounded out from within the crowd. Top 3 first-class roll scholars. That's definitely going to contain me. When Fang Zhengji heard, he instantly believed that this was a great opportunity to turn rich. If he missed this opportunity, he would have to wait another 2 years. On the other hand, Li Zhuangshi and the rest had already squeezed their way into the crowd, but, very quickly, they came back out. Sigh. This Meng Yushu's rate, isn't it a little too low? Li Zhuangshi seemed rather unhappy. Uncle Li, I heard that this Meng Yushu had already accessed Dao. Logically, he should be able to directly participate in the capital examinations. His purpose of coming to the county examinations is just for leisure and gain the title of double roll champion. It's normal for him to have such a low rate. Meng Jiangshan spoke, seeming to have understood. True. At least it's an investment that will definitely pay off. Li Zhuangshi sighed and prepared to leave. You really want to buy Meng Yushu? You will lose. Fang Zhengji felt that he had to remind these people. Their foresight was too poor. Don't tell me they can't even see this roll champion standing right in front of them. Don't buy Meng Yushu. Don't tell me we have to buy you. Ha ha ha. When Li Zhuangshi heard Fang Zhengji's words, he instantly began to laugh, seeming to be extremely confident in the information he had. Yes, I think if you buy me, you will win. Fang Zhengji replied confidently. Ha ha ha. You can't even enter the examination venue, buy you. Li Zhuangshi once again began to laugh, then paying no further attention to Fang Zhengji, swung his arms and squeezed into the crowd. Fang Zhengji also squeezed, but his method was not exactly the same. Li Zhuangshi used brute force, while Fang Zhengji used the indirect technique of stepping on toes. Ouch! Ow! Who stepped on my feet? Like a gust of wind, Fang Zhengji overtook Li Zhuangshi and reached the front of the counter. Li Zhuangshi was already sweating profusely as he squeezed among the crowd. When he suddenly realized that Fang Zhengji had already reached the front of the counter, his eyes instantly widened. What method did this kid use? By Fang Zhengji. When Fang Zhengji reached the counter, he instantly put down 10 silver pieces. He really bought himself. Among the crowd, Li Zhuangshi heard Fang Zhengji's words and was filled with disbelief. Isn't this downright dumb? He can't even enter the examination venue, yet he still bet on himself. Li Huer and the rest, who were also squeezing among the crowd, had also heard Fang Zhengji's words, and were similarly shocked. Was Fang Zhengji stupid? He definitely wasn't. Then why would he spend money to buy himself? Don't tell me he really had a way of entering the examination venue. Is this even possible? When the boy servant who was busy collecting money at the counter suddenly heard Fang Zhengji's words, he was similar stunned. Almost everybody here bought Meng Yushu, hence, he already held a bunch of paper slips with Meng Yushu written on it, giving out one to almost everybody who came. He just had to write the amount of money they wished to bet on it. But out of the blue, there was someone buying Fang Zhengji. Fang Zhengji. Who is that? The boy's servant didn't even wish to bother with him, but after seeing the 20 pieces of silver in front of him, he finally gritted his teeth and flipped through the name list on his hand. Then, he realized there wasn't even such a person. Are you sure this Fang Zhengji registered? The boy's servant's tone was rather irritated. Oh. When Fang Zhengji heard this, he instantly realized a critical problem. It seemed that he really didn't register. This seems, I can't confirm. Are you crazy? You have to bet on somebody with this 10 silver pieces, else I won't take it. The boy's servant was evidently annoyed. Didn't this guy see that he was busy? He must be here to cause trouble. Fang Zhengji was a reasonable person, and most importantly, his gambling character was strong. Since he had already took out the money, doing something that lacked character such as keeping it back was something he wasn't exactly very willing to do. Fang Zhengji, why not you just follow us and buy Meng Yushu? Li Zhuangshi had finally made his way over at this moment, looked at the 10 pieces of silver on the table and sighed. Alright, then I'll bet that Meng Yushu doesn't make it to the top 3 in the theory examinations. Fang Zhengji's voice wasn't loud, but it instantly caused the bustling crowd to quieten down. But not too long later, the silence turned into roars of laughter. Ha ha ha. He actually bet that Meng Yushu would not make it into the top 3. Did I hear this correctly? A person who had accessed Dao, not making it into the top 3 of the theory examinations. How could such a thing even be possible? Exactly, he must be here to give away money. Within the crowd, the look on everybody's faces as they looked at Fang Zhengji was as if they had seen a fool. Even Li Zhuangshi, Li Huer and the rest looked at the 10 silver pieces and shook their heads. Who would have known that the famously clever Fang Zhengji in the southern and northern mountain village had become a fool when he entered the county? Fang Zhengji happily walked out from the crowd, holding on to the bill of warrant that the boy servant had written, completely ignoring the crowd's discussions. Fool. You people are the fools. Fang Zhengji didn't feel that he would lose any money at all. Based on the information he had obtained visiting the county the previous time, he knew very clearly that Meng Yushu was full of respect towards Yan Xiu. That meant that Yan Xiu's abilities were definitely stronger than Meng Yushu. Furthermore, Yan Xiu's age and his were around the same, hence naturally he would participate in the law of Dao examinations. After calculation, Yan Xiu would occupy a spot, he would occupy another spot. The last spot would be simple. All he needed to do was to do some tampering, write out another copy of his answer, make some minor edits and randomly toss it over to a candidate near him. He would instantly rise meteorically and become the top 3 in the theory examinations. A 10 times pay. Out. In a blink of an eye, 10 silver pieces would become 100. It was definitely something to be happy about. Boom. As Fang Zhengji smiled delightedly, a gong sounded from the Qingfeng Academy. The first gong, entering the venue. Ha ha ha. Fang Zhengji, the gong has sounded. Let me see how you even enter. When he heard the gong, Li Hue instantly walked over the Fang Zhengji's side and grinned happily. Li Zhuangshi, Meng Jiangshan and the rest also began to approach him and followed behind Fang Zhengji. Their meaning was clear, let's see how you enter. Oh, look and see. Fang Zhengji smiled, then strode towards the Qingfeng Academy. Li Hue and the rest glanced at each other, and followed closely behind. Not too long later, the queue had reached Fang Zhengji. Examination card. The guard in charge of inspecting didn't even bother glancing at Fang Zhengji, and shouted out the usual phrase. Then, Li Hue and the rest of the people following right behind Fang Zhengji began to laugh. Ha ha ha, without the examination card, let me see how you enter. Then. The smiles on their faces froze. Because, Fang Zhengji very quickly took out a piece of examination card and passed it to the guard. The guard was indeed responsible, inspecting the examination card closely, but finally threw it into a wooden box at the side. Enter. Fang Zhengji smiled, thanked him sincerely and stepped in. When Li Hue, Li Zhuangshi and the rest witnessed this, their eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. They were simply unable to believe what had just happened in front of their eyes. He entered.